The centerpiece at our anniversary dinner was a single white orchid in a slender glass vase. I remember staring at it when my husband slid the envelope across the table. "You need to sign these tonight," he said. The restaurant was quiet. A Tuesday. We'd chosen it because it was where we'd had our first date 25 years ago, almost to the day. I thought he'd planned something, a speech maybe, the kind of thing he used to do before everything got complicated. I looked at the envelope. Then at him. "What is this?" He didn't answer right away. He picked up his water glass, took a long sip, set it down. Careful, practiced, like he'd rehearsed this moment so many times that the nerves had finally worn smooth. "Divorce papers," he said. "My attorney drew them up. It's all pretty straightforward." I didn't touch the envelope. 25 years. A daughter in her second year of nursing school. A house we'd spent 4 summers renovating with our own hands. A business I'd built from a spare bedroom while he finished his MBA. I sat across from the man I'd made all of it with, and I felt something strange. Not rage, not grief, just a kind of hollow clarity, like a room after all the furniture's been removed. "Is there someone else?" I asked. He said no. That was the first lie of the evening. I should tell you who we were before I tell you what happened next. My name is Nora. I'm 41. I grew up in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows your grandmother's maiden name and your business is never entirely your own. My mother raised me and my younger brother alone after my father left when I was 9. She worked dispatch at a trucking company for 30 years. She had strong hands and a very short memory for other people's apologies. I met my husband, I'll call him my husband for now, because that's what he still was, at a friend's birthday party in Cincinnati. He was charming in the way that some people are charming effortlessly, the kind of charm that makes you feel like the most interesting person in the room. His name is Marcus. He had a plan for everything, and back then I found that reassuring. We got married at 26. Small ceremony, backyard of his parents' place in Lexington. I wore my grandmother's earrings. His mother cried happy tears. My mother shook his hand very firmly and said, "You take care of her." He promised he would. For a long time he did, or at least I thought he did. I started my company, a healthcare staffing firm, out of our second bedroom 8 years into our marriage. We had our daughter Lily 2 years before that. Marcus was climbing at a regional bank by then, good salary, benefits, the kind of steady income that made it possible for me to take the risk of starting something from nothing. What I didn't fully understand at the time was that the risk was almost entirely mine. I worked 60-hour weeks for the first 3 years. I handled payroll, compliance, client relationships, everything. Marcus handled his career. That was the arrangement, and I told myself it was fair because his income was keeping us afloat while I built something, but my company started to grow, and then it grew faster. By year 5, we had 42 clients across 3 states. By year 8, we had a staff of 11 and revenues I still sometimes have to remind myself are real. I had quietly become the primary earner in our household by a significant margin. Marcus knew this. We had a shared account for household expenses and separate accounts for our own professional finances. His idea originally. I'd agreed because it seemed tidy. What I didn't know was that he'd been consulting with a family law attorney for 7 months before that Tuesday dinner. He had done the math. He wanted half. Here is what I knew going into that restaurant. My attorney's name is Patricia. She has an office in downtown Columbus and a framed needlepoint on her wall that says, "Well-behaved women seldom make history." My mother's best friend from church had used her in a divorce 12 years earlier and came out of it with the house, the retirement account, and her dignity intact. I'd had Patricia's number in my phone for 2 years before I ever called her. I called her 4 months before our anniversary dinner. I want to be honest about why. There was no single moment. It wasn't a text I found or a charge on the credit card or a feeling that arrived fully formed. It was smaller than that, a gradual accumulation of absences, the way he started working late and then later, the way he'd step outside to take certain calls, the way he'd stopped asking about my work, not with irritation, the way couples sometimes get, but with a pointed disinterest, like he was deliberately looking away from something he didn't want to have to account for. I called Patricia and I said, I don't know if anything is actually wrong. I just want to understand where I stand. She told me where I stood. She also told me what to do about it. In the state of Ohio, a business started during a marriage can be considered marital property, even if only one spouse built it. The key word is can. There are structures that change that. There are steps you can take. There were steps I hadn't taken because I'd never imagined I would need to. Over the next 4 months, with Patricia's guidance, I took those steps. I restructured my company. A portion of it, the intellectual property, the proprietary staffing methodology I'd spent years developing, the client contracts under my name, was transferred into a trust. Not hidden, not fraudulent, documented, disclosed, legal in every way. Patricia was meticulous about that. She said, "We are not doing anything he can come after you for. We are doing everything you should have done years ago." My accountant, a woman named Ruth who has done my books since year 2, called it the most overdue corporate housekeeping she'd ever seen. I signed the final trust documents on a Monday afternoon in October. Patricia's assistant brought in coffee. We went through everything twice. When it was done, Patricia said, "Now you're protected, however this goes." 4 days later, Marcus made his reservation at our anniversary restaurant. He slid the envelope across the table and I looked at it and I thought, he has no idea. I picked it up. I opened it. I read through the top pages slowly, the way Patricia had coached me. Look for what he's claiming. Look for what he thinks he's entitled to. He was claiming half of my business. He had a valuation done. His attorney had estimated the company's worth at just over $4 million. He wanted $2 million plus the house, plus a percentage of my ongoing revenue for the next 5 years. I set the papers down. I folded my hands on the table. The orchid sat between us in its little glass vase. "Who is she?" I asked again. "Nora, Marcus." I said it the way my mother used to say my name when I was 12, and she already knew exactly what I'd done. "Who is she?" He looked out the window. There was a couple on the sidewalk outside, laughing about something, sharing an umbrella even though it wasn't raining. "Her name is Sasha," he said. "She works in the commercial lending division. 11 months. That's how long it had been going on. He told me this like he was confessing something in church, like honesty now might count for something. I thought about the Monday afternoon in October, Patricia's office, the coffee, Ruth's voice on the phone the week before saying, "You're all set, honey." "Okay," I said. I took the pen from inside the envelope. His attorney had helpfully included one, and I signed the divorce papers, every page that needed a signature. I was calm the entire time. My hand didn't shake. Marcus watched me with an expression I hadn't seen on his face before, something between relief and unease, like he'd expected a fight and the absence of one was somehow more alarming. I pushed the papers back across the table. "You should know," I said, "that my attorney will be in touch with yours first thing tomorrow morning. There are some things about the business structure that weren't reflected in your valuation." I put on my coat. I picked up my purse. I left $200 on the table for the dinner we hadn't ordered yet, because the waiter had been kind to us and none of this was his fault. I walked out of that restaurant and I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time. I didn't cry exactly. I grieved, I think. There's a difference. Grief is what you do when something is really over. I grieved the version of us that I'd believed in for a long time, the backyard wedding, his mother's happy tears, the 4 summers of renovation and the inside jokes we'd built into the walls of that house along with the drywall. Then I called my daughter. "Mom," she said, "what's going on?" "Your father and I are getting divorced," I told her. "I'm okay. I want you to hear it from me first." She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Are you actually okay, or are you saying that?" "Both," I said. "Give me a week and it'll just be the first one." Patricia's call to Marcus's attorney went out at 8:15 the following morning. By noon, Marcus had called me 4 times. I let them all go to voicemail. By 2 o'clock, he was texting. By 4, the text had shifted from clipped and formal to something raw. "I didn't know about the trust. You need to call me. Nora, what did you do?" I read them while sitting at my desk in the building I'd leased with my own credit 4 years earlier, surrounded by a team of 11 people who showed up every day because I had built something worth showing up for. Here is what Marcus's attorney had discovered that morning. The valuation of $4 million was based on a business structure that no longer existed. The intellectual property, the staffing methodology, the proprietary matching system I'd spent 2 years developing with a software consultant, the contracts with our top 14 clients had been transferred into a trust prior to the filing of his divorce petition. Legally, cleanly, with full documentation. The remaining marital portion of the business had a significantly different value. Patricia explained it to me this way: he was planning to divide a pie. He didn't know that most of the pie had already been moved to a different counter. The house was the house. We'd fight about the equity and probably settle. There was a retirement account in my name that predated the marriage. Patricia was confident about that. The revenue sharing request was going to be a longer conversation, but she wasn't worried. Marcus had planned this for 7 months. He'd had an attorney, a valuation, a strategy. He'd chosen our anniversary dinner as the venue because he thought the symbolism would disarm me. He thought I would be too devastated, too sentimental, too unprepared to do anything but sign what he put in front of me. What he did not know, and what I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for, is that my mother raised me to have strong hands and a very short memory for other people's apologies. The divorce took 14 months to finalize. That's not unusual in Ohio for a contested case, and ours was contested in the early stages, though Marcus's attorney grew noticeably quieter as discovery proceeded and it became clear that the business valuation they built their entire strategy around was not going to hold. We settled on the house. I bought him out of his share of the equity and kept it. The mortgage is manageable. I've started painting the living room a color my daughter calls aggressively cheerful. I think of it as optimistic. Sasha, the woman from the commercial lending division, moved in with Marcus 3 months after he moved out. My daughter has met her twice. She described her to me with the diplomatic neutrality of someone who loves both of her parents and is trying very hard. I respect that. I told her she never has to say more than she wants to. I had dinner with Patricia after the final decree came through. She ordered a very expensive bottle of wine and said it was on her. I said that seemed like a conflict of interest. She said she was off the clock. We talked for a long time. At some point she asked me how I'd known to call her 4 months before Marcus made his reservation. I thought about it honestly. I don't know if I knew, I said. I think I just got tired of not knowing where I stood. I think I'd been managing uncertainty for so long that I finally wanted to just know, whatever it was. She nodded. She said that was more common than I might think. Women who called her not because something had broken, but because they'd finally gotten tired of bracing for it. And the ones who wait, I asked. She was quiet for a moment. They're not always worse off, she said carefully, but they're always more surprised. I want to tell you something about the trust that I haven't told many people. When Patricia first explained the restructuring to me, what we could protect, how, within what time frame, I went home that night and I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The house was quiet. Marcus was traveling for work or said he was. I thought about whether what I was doing was defensive or preemptive, whether there was a difference, whether restructuring my business to protect what I built was a betrayal of the marriage or simply the thing I should have done 8 years earlier when the company first became worth protecting. I decided it was the second thing, not because it felt better, but because it was true. I had built that company. I had built it during a marriage, yes. Marcus's stable income in those early years had given me the runway to take the risk, and I've never pretended otherwise. But the methodology, the client relationships, the reputation, that was mine. The 11 people who worked for me were there because of choices I had made, calls I had taken, problems I had solved at 10 o'clock at night while he was already asleep. The law says marital property is shared. That's the law, and I understand why it exists. But Patricia found a way to ensure that what was truly mine was recognized as such, within the law. Transparently, because I'd finally decided that protecting what I built wasn't something I needed to apologize for. My mother called me the night after I signed the trust documents. I hadn't told her what was happening. I didn't want to worry her. She asked how I was doing, the way she always does. And I said, fine, the way I always do. And then she said, out of nowhere, you know, your grandmother always said the best time to fix a fence is before the storm. I asked her why she was telling me that. No reason, she said. I just thought of it. I don't know if she knew something, she never said. But I've thought about that phone call many times since. My company is doing well. We expanded into a fourth state this past spring. I'm looking at office space in Indianapolis. Ruth says the numbers are the best they've ever been, and she's been saying that for 3 consecutive quarters, which she also finds amusing. Lily finished her second year of nursing school and came home for the summer. We repainted the living room together, both of us in old clothes, the kind of afternoon where you talk about everything and nothing and don't realize until later that something important passed between you. At one point she stopped and looked at the wall and said, "Mom, this is really a lot of yellow." I said, "I know." She laughed. Then she said, "I'm proud of you. I just want you to know that." I didn't ask her what for. I knew what she meant. There are things I wish had been different. I wish my marriage had been what I thought it was. I wish Marcus had been who I believed he was for most of 25 years. I wish the anniversary dinner had been just that, an anniversary dinner with something to celebrate in the place where we'd started. But I've stopped spending time in the country of things that didn't happen. It's a real place, that country. You can live there if you want. The air is thick with everything that should have been different, and the borders are always open. I'd rather be here, in my aggressively cheerful living room, with my daughter's laughter still somewhere in the walls, with 11 people showing up tomorrow because something I built is worth showing up for. Marcus's attorney sent one last letter 2 months after the final decree. A very measured, formal acknowledgement that the settlement terms had been satisfied by all parties. Patricia read it and said, "That's lawyer for this is done." I put it in a folder, filed it under D. Done. I've thought a lot about timing, not luck, timing. The difference between the two is that luck is something that happens to you, and timing is something you decide. Marcus spent 7 months building a plan. He hired an attorney, got a valuation done, chose the restaurant, chose the date. He was methodical about it. I'll give him that. He thought the anniversary, the candlelight, the weight of 25 years sitting between us would make me too slow to think clearly. He thought sentiment was the same thing as weakness. What he didn't account for was that I had been paying attention. Not to him exactly, to myself, to the slow, quiet realization that I had spent years building something real and hadn't done the basic work of protecting it. That's not his fault, that's mine. I was so focused on growing the company, on the next client, the next quarter, the next hire, that I never stopped to ask the question every person who builds something should eventually ask, what happens to this if everything else falls apart? Patricia asked me that question the first time we met. She didn't ask it dramatically, she just asked it the way a good doctor asks about something you've been ignoring, matter of fact and without judgment. And I sat across from her and I realized I didn't have a good answer. That's where it started. Not with betrayal, not with rage, not with the discovery of some text message or a charge on a credit card. It started with me deciding I was tired of not knowing where I stood. That's the part I want people to understand, because I think we're taught, especially women who've built something alongside someone else, that protecting yourself is somehow a sign that you don't trust. That wanting legal clarity means you're already planning for the worst. It doesn't mean that. It means you're being honest about the fact that the worst is always possible, and that being prepared for it isn't the same as expecting it. What I did in Patricia's office was not revenge. It was correction. It was doing, 4 months before I needed it, what I should have done 8 years earlier when the company first became worth protecting. The trust was legal. The restructuring was documented. Ruth had been saying for years that my corporate housekeeping was overdue. I finally listened. And here's what I know now. On the other side of it, the people who plan to take something from you are counting on you being unprepared. That's the whole strategy. Marcus's attorney built an entire case around a version of my company that no longer existed by the time he filed. Not because I did anything underhanded, because I'd finally gotten around to doing what I should have done a long time ago. There's a kind of intelligence that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't raise its voice at the anniversary dinner. It doesn't cry in the parking garage, or at least it waits until it's alone to do it. It just does the quiet, unglamorous work of understanding its own situation clearly, and then it acts on that understanding. Lily told me she was proud of me, and I knew what she meant. She didn't mean the trust or the settlement. She meant that I had looked at something hard, and I hadn't looked away. That when I finally understood what I was dealing with, I did something about it instead of waiting to see what would happen to me. That's all any of us can do, really. Pay attention. Ask the hard questions before someone else forces you to. Protect what you've built, not out of fear, but out of respect for the work it took to build it. The fence before the storm,